The evening sky above the event hall was painted in shades of gold and purple, a quiet reminder that another day was coming to an end. Inside, the hall was filled with warm light, rows of seats, and the soft hum of hundreds of people talking. Banners hung from the high walls, each carrying a message of progress, unity, and hope. Yet despite the energy in the room, Narendra Modi stood near the edge of the stage with a distant look in his eyes. The event had gone on for hours, and his schedule was already overflowing. His aides were gently signaling that it was time to leave, time to head to the next meeting, the next responsibility. He took a slow breath, his eyes moving over the crowd one last time. There were still so many people he had not spoken to, but he had learned long ago that he could not be everywhere at once. The thought made him feel a quiet heaviness in his chest. He turned slightly toward the exit, his mind already shifting to the next task, when a voice called out from the side of the stage. It was calm yet steady, carrying a tone that was neither hurried nor casual. "Sir, before you leave, may I share something with you?" Modi turned and saw Sundar Pichai standing there, a gentle smile on his face, but his eyes were full of something deeper, something that made Modi pause. Sundar had been waiting for the right moment, watching quietly from the side as the event unfolded. He had been invited to speak earlier in the day, but he had chosen instead to listen. And now, just as Modi was about to step away, he had decided to speak. Modi gave a small nod, expecting a quick comment, perhaps a polite farewell. But Sundar stepped closer, his voice steady yet warm. "Sir, I know your time is precious. I also know you have many places to be tonight. But I believe there is something here you might want to see. Something that could mean more than any meeting, more than any headline." The words were not loud, yet they carried a weight that seemed to settle into the air. Modi stopped fully now, curiosity rising inside him. He could see that Sundar was not speaking for the sake of politeness. There was an urgency hidden beneath his calm tone. "What is it?" Modi asked, his voice softer now. Sundar's eyes shifted toward the far corner of the hall. "There is a young girl here," he said quietly. "She has been waiting for hours, just to meet you. She has no phone, no camera, no social media. She only has a small notebook, and in it, she has written something for you. I think if you leave now, she will never get to share it. And if you read it, I believe it will stay with you for a long time." The words hung between them for a moment. In the background, the chatter of the crowd seemed to fade, as if the world had given them a pocket of silence. Modi felt an unexpected tug in his heart. He thought of the hundreds of events he had attended over the years, the countless hands he had shaken, the smiling faces he had seen. Yet here was a stranger's voice, telling him that there was one more moment worth staying for. His aide stepped forward, gently reminding him of the schedule, but Modi raised a hand, signaling them to wait. Something in Sundar's voice told him this was not about politics or formality. This was about something real, something human. As they began walking toward the far corner of the hall, Modi noticed Sundar's quiet presence beside him. There was no rush in his steps, no nervousness in his tone. It was as if Sundar had complete faith that whatever they were about to see was worth the time. Modi found himself wondering why Sundar cared so much, why he had chosen to stop him at this exact moment. When they reached the edge of the crowd, Modi saw her. A thin girl, perhaps 14 or 15, stood near a row of chairs. Her clothes were simple, her hair neatly tied back. She clutched a worn notebook close to her chest, her fingers trembling just slightly. When her eyes met Modi's, they widened, and for a moment she looked as if she could not breathe. Modi smiled gently, lowering himself a little so they were closer in height. "You have something for me?" he asked. The girl nodded and slowly opened the notebook. Her hands shook so much that Sundar stepped forward to steady the pages for her. Inside, the handwriting was small and careful, each word written with clear effort. She began to read aloud, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Dear sir," she began, "I know you meet many people every day, and maybe you will not remember me. But I want to tell you that 3 years ago, my village got electricity for the first time. Before that, I studied at night using a small oil lamp, and sometimes there was not enough oil. But after the electricity came, I could study every night, without worry. Last year, I came first in my school. I want to thank you for making this possible." Modi listened in silence, his chest tightening with each word. The girl's voice wavered slightly, but she kept going. She spoke about her dreams, of becoming a teacher, of helping children in her village learn without fear or struggle. She said she wanted to build a small library someday, so no child would have to wait for books the way she once had. When she finished, there was a quiet stillness around them. Sundar looked at Modi, and in that look was the unspoken reason he had stopped him. It was not about the schedule, the meetings, or the speeches. It was about moments like this, moments that reminded them both why they did what they did. Modi felt a deep warmth in his chest, but also a weight. He knew that if he had walked away, this girl's words would have been lost to him forever. He turned to Sundar, and for a brief moment, they shared a silent understanding. "Thank you for stopping me," Modi said quietly, and Sundar simply replied, "Some moments are worth more than time." Modi stayed longer that night, longer than he had planned, longer than his team expected. Because sometimes, it is not the biggest events that matter most. It is the smallest voices, the quietest words, that leave the deepest mark. The crowd had thinned a little, but the soft buzz of voices still filled the hall. The young girl stood smiling shyly, clutching her notebook once more, as Modi gently patted her shoulder. She had spoken from her heart, and though she had no idea, her words had quietly changed the mood of the evening. A few people nearby had paused to listen, their faces reflecting the quiet power of her story. Modi turned to Sundar as they stepped a few paces away from the girl. "You knew about her before tonight," he said, more as a statement than a question. Sundar nodded. "I met her earlier while walking around the hall. She was sitting alone, not talking to anyone. When I asked if she had spoken to you, she said she probably wouldn't get the chance. That's when I knew I had to make sure she did." There was something in Sundar's tone, soft but unshakable, that reminded Modi of his own early years. Days when he had been one voice in a large crowd, hoping someone would listen. They moved toward a quiet corner where a table of water bottles stood. The rest of the guests were busy with conversations, cameras, and polite greetings. Here, away from the noise, the two men could speak without interruption. "Do you remember?" Sundar began slowly. "The first time someone important truly listened to you. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to." Modi looked thoughtful, the question pulling him into a memory he had not visited in years. "Yes," he said after a pause. "I was a teenager. I had gone to hear a speaker in my town. He was not famous then, but his words stayed with me. After the event, I gathered the courage to ask him something. He stopped, even though he was surrounded by people, and answered me as if I was the only person there. That moment changed me. It made me believe my voice mattered." Sundar smiled, gently. "Then you understand why I stopped you tonight." There was a long, comfortable silence. In it, the two men stood as equals, not as a prime minister and a CEO. Not as public figures, but as two people who understood the rare value of being truly heard. After a moment, Sundar glanced toward the hall's exit. "There's another reason I wanted to keep you here a little longer," he said quietly. Modi's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in curiosity. "And what is that?" Sundar hesitated, his gaze lowering for just a second before meeting Modi's eyes again. "There is someone else here tonight. Someone you knew a long time ago. Someone you might not expect." Modi's breath caught ever so slightly. "Who?" Instead of answering, Sundar simply said, "If you trust me, I'll take you to him." They began walking again, weaving past small groups of guests. Modi, I could feel a strange mix of emotions, stirring inside him: anticipation, uncertainty, and a quiet hope he could not quite explain. It had been many years since someone had led him toward a surprise without telling him what to expect. As they moved toward the far side of the hall, Sundar spoke in a low voice. "This man came here tonight not to ask for anything, but to say something to you. When I first saw him, I didn't recognize him, but when he told me his name and the story, I knew you would remember." Modi felt his steps slow slightly. "You are making this sound important." Sundar gave a small smile. "It is." And then, just as they rounded the corner past a large decorative pillar, Modi saw him. An elderly man sat at one of the tables, his posture slightly bent but his eyes sharp and alert. His hair was white, his clothes simple, and his hands rested calmly on the table in front of him. When he saw Modi, he rose slowly to his feet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Modi's mind was already racing, searching his memory. There was something familiar about the man's face, something that pulled him backward through time. And then, as the man gave a small, knowing smile, Modi remembered. He remembered the dusty streets of his childhood town, the sound of wooden carts passing, the scent of tea boiling in a small roadside stall. He remembered a kind voice telling him stories, teaching him lessons that had nothing to do with books but everything to do with life. And now, decades later, that same man was standing before him. The hall around them seemed to fade away. Modi stepped forward slowly, his voice just above a whisper. "It's you." The moment Modi spoke those two words, the old man's smile grew just a little wider. There was no rush between them, no need to fill the silence with empty greetings. It was as if both knew that the years between their last meeting and now could not erase what they once shared. "Yes," the man said softly. "It's me, Ramon. Bye." The name struck something deep inside Modi. Memories that had been buried under decades of public life came rushing back. He saw himself again as a boy, standing barefoot on a warm street, carrying a small basket of teacups. He remembered stopping at a wooden stall where Ramon Bai worked, the smell of fresh ginger and cardamom filling the air. Ramon Bai had been more than a tea seller. He was a storyteller, a quiet philosopher who had a way of making even the smallest moments feel important. He never had much money, but he had a heart that gave freely. Sometimes, when the young Modi passed by after a long day, Ramon Bai would hand him a free cup of tea and say, "You look like you could use this. Don't worry about the price." "How long has it been?" Modi asked, his voice touched with awe. "More than 50 years, Ramon Bai replied, his eyes shining. "I have followed your journey from afar. I watched you grow from a boy with big dreams into a man who carries the hopes of a nation. I never thought we would meet again in this life." Sundar stood quietly to the side, watching the two men. His decision to bring them together was already worth every second. He could see in Modi's eyes the rare kind of connection that only comes from shared history. Modi reached forward and clasped Ramon Bai's hands. They were rough, marked by years of work, yet warm and steady. "Why didn't you ever come to see me before?" Modi asked. Ramon Bai chuckled softly. "Because I never wanted anything from you. I was happy knowing you were doing well. But when I heard you would be here tonight, something told me I should come, not to ask for help, just to remind you of something you once told me." Modi tilted his head. "And what was that?" Ramon Bai's voice softened even more. "You were about 12 years old. One evening, you sat here by my stall and said, 'One day, I will do something that matters, something that will help people.' I told you that dreams like that are not easy, and you looked me in the eye and said, 'Then I will work until they come true.'" The words hit Modi like a wave. He could see the scene clearly in his mind, the small tea stall, the fading light, the smell of chai in the air, and that boy's voice, his own voice, ringing with determination. You kept your word, Ramon Bai said quietly. But I came tonight to remind you, never forget the boy who made that promise. There was a deep silence. Modi felt an ache in his chest, not of sadness, but of gratitude. He realized that in the rush of leading, in the constant demands of life, it was easy to forget the simple truths that had once guided him. He glanced at Sundar, who gave a small nod, as if to say, "This is why I wanted you to stay." "Will you stay for a while, Ramon Bai?" Modi asked. "We have much to talk about." The old man smiled. "For you, always." As they sat together at the table, a quiet circle formed around them, not from security or formality, but from the simple respect people felt when they saw something rare. Two lives, connected across decades, meeting again in a moment that neither fame nor power could create. And somewhere inside, Modi knew that this night was already becoming one of those moments he would carry forever. The table they sat at was tucked into a quiet corner of the hall. The noise of the event faded into the background, replaced by the warm hum of a few distant conversations. A faint aroma of tea drifted from a nearby service counter, and for a brief moment, it almost felt like the past had returned. Modi leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Ramon Bai. "Tell me," he said gently, "how have the years been for you?" Ramon Bai chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that carries both joy and the weight of many years. "Life has been simple," he replied. "After the tea stall closed, I worked here and there. Some years were kind, some were hard, but I never went hungry, and I never forgot the faces of those who stopped to share a cup of tea and a few kind words. Sometimes, that is enough." Sundar listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. He had met countless successful people in his life, but he had always believed that wisdom often lived in the quietest corners of the world. Ramon Bai sipped from the glass of water in front of him, and then glanced at Sundar. "And you?" he said. "You are the one who made this meeting happen." Sundar smiled modestly. "I only did what felt right." Ramon Bai tilted his head. "Funny, I feel like I've seen you before." The words caught Sundar off guard. "You might have," he said after a pause. "But perhaps not where you think." Modi looked between them, curious. "What do you mean?" Sundar leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but steady. "Many years ago, when I was still in school, I visited your town for a small academic competition. It wasn't a big event, just a gathering of students from different districts. I was nervous, and I had no idea where to go for lunch. I wandered into a small tea stall." Modi's eyes widened slightly, and Ramon Bai leaned back in his chair. "There was an old man there," Sundar continued, "who gave me a cup of tea and a small plate of snacks. When I reached for my wallet, I realized I had forgotten it at the guest house. I was embarrassed, but the man waved it off and said, 'Some kindness doesn't need payment.' I never forgot that day." Ramon Bai's eyes softened, a slow smile forming on his face. "That was my stall," he said quietly. "I remember now. You were the boy with the big glasses and the heavy school bag?" Sundar laughed gently. "Yes. And I remember thinking how strange it was that a stranger could be so kind for no reason." Modi looked at Sundar with a new expression, one that mixed surprise, respect, and a quiet recognition. "So you have carried his kindness with you all these years?" Sundar nodded. "It's part of why I believe in small moments. Tonight, when I saw that girl waiting to speak to you, I remembered the tea stall. I remembered how a small act can change the way someone feels about the world. I couldn't let her moment pass." There was a pause, deep and unbroken. The three of them sat there, bound together by invisible threads of past kindness, so small at the time, yet powerful enough to ripple through decades. Modi felt a lump in his throat. He realized that the man who had once given him comfort as a boy had also unknowingly shaped the heart of one of the world's most influential leaders. And now, by some quiet twist of fate, they were all sitting together, sharing the same table. Ramon. I looked at them both. Maybe this is why I came tonight, he said. Not just to see you, but to see how the kindness we give away can find its way back to us in ways we never expect. And in that moment, Moti knew the night was far from over. There was still more to uncover, more to feel, and perhaps even more to remember. For a few moments, none of them spoke. The air around the table felt thick with memories. Like a thread that had been quietly weaving through their lives for decades, had suddenly revealed itself. Moti's gaze moved between Ramon Bai and Sundar, and he felt something rare, a sense that the night was building toward a truth he had not yet seen. Ramon Bai's hands rested on the table, his fingers tracing invisible lines in the wood. Then he looked up at Moti, his eyes carrying the weight of a story he had kept for years. There is one more thing I should tell you, he said slowly. Something you may not remember. Moti leaned in, his curiosity deepening. What is it? Ramon Bai took a long breath. It was the monsoon season, many years ago. The streets were flooded, the rain falling so hard you could barely see a few feet ahead. You were about 15, carrying a bundle of old books tied with rope. I was closing the stall early because of the storm. But as I turned to leave, I saw you walking through the water, your clothes soaked, your feet bare. Moti closed his eyes. For a moment, trying to picture it. The image came easily, the smell of wet earth, the heavy rain on his shoulders, the rope cutting into his hands. You came to me, Ramon Bai continued, and you asked if I could keep the books safe for the night. You said they belonged to the community reading group you had started for younger children in the neighborhood. You were worried the rain would damage them. Moti smiled faintly, the memory slowly unfolding. Yes, I remember now. Those books were all we had back then. Ramon Bai nodded. I kept them safe, but what stayed with me was what you said before you left. You told me, one day, I will make sure no child has to walk through a storm just to protect a book. I never forgot those words. The table fell silent again. Sundar's eyes met Moti's, and he could see that this was not just a memory. It was a seed of a promise that had shaped who Moti became. Moti spoke softly, almost to himself. So much has happened since then. I kept moving forward, but I didn't realize how much that day stayed with me. Sundar leaned forward, his voice low. And maybe tonight is a reminder. Sometimes the promises we make as children are not just dreams. They are instructions from the person we were, telling us what matters most. Moti thought about the girl from earlier, holding her notebook. He thought about her dream of a library. And then he thought about the rain, the books, and the boy he once was. Ramon Bai smiled gently. I am telling you this now because I see that the boy kept his word, but maybe the promise is not finished yet. The words landed heavily, but not in a way that weighed Moti down. Instead, they felt like a quiet push forward, as if the night itself was guiding him toward something he needed to do. He sat back, the gears in his mind turning. The evening had started as just another event on his busy schedule. Now, it felt like the beginning of something else, something personal, something unfinished, and he knew exactly what his next step had to be. Moti sat still for a long moment, his fingers lightly tapping the table as if the rhythm could help him gather his thoughts. Around them, the hall was beginning to empty. Most guests had left, the sound of footsteps echoing against the polished floor. But at that table, time seemed to have slowed, holding them in a quiet space where the past and present were gently colliding. He looked at Ramon Bai, then at Sundar. You are both right, he said finally. The boy who made that promise is still here, and he still has work to do. There was no announcement, no formal tone, just the steady voice of someone who had made up his mind. He rose from his chair and motioned for the two of them to follow him. Sundar glanced at Ramon Bai, who simply smiled and stood, his walking stick tapping softly against the floor as they made their way toward the front of the hall. The young girl with the notebook was still there. She was speaking with one of the volunteers, her face bright, but a little tired from the long day. When she saw Moti walking toward her again, her eyes widened in surprise. She quickly straightened her posture, clutching the notebook close to her chest. "May I see your notebook again?" Moti asked gently. She nodded and handed it to him. He flipped through the pages slowly, reading her careful handwriting. Some pages were filled with short stories, others with lists of things she wanted to do in her village. One page stopped him. At the top, she had written, "Library plan." It was simpler drawing of a small room with shelves, a reading table, and a place for children to sit. Underneath, she had written a list of books she hoped to fill it with. Moti closed the notebook and handed it back. "You will have your library," he said. Her eyes widened again. "Sir," he smiled, "and it will have enough books so no child in your village will ever have to walk through a storm to protect them." She didn't understand the deeper meaning of his words, but Sundar and Ramon Bhai did. Both of them felt the quiet power in that promise. Moti turned to one of his aides, who had been waiting at a distance. "I want this done," he said simply. "Find the space, build it, fill it." The aide nodded quickly, sensing this was not a suggestion but a commitment. Sundar stepped forward. "If you will allow me, I would like to contribute as well. I will make sure the library has not just books, but also computers and internet access so that children can learn beyond the walls." Moti smiled at him, and for a moment, there was nothing political, nothing formal, just two people working toward the same dream. Ramon Bhai placed his hand on Moti's shoulder. "The boy kept his word," he said softly, "and tonight he made it even stronger." The young girl's eyes shimmered with tears, though she tried to hide them. She had come here with nothing but a notebook and a hope. Now, she was walking away with a promise that would change her life and the lives of many others. As they stepped out of the hall into the cool night air, the rain had begun to fall again, light and steady. Moti tilted his head slightly upward, feeling the drops on his face. He thought of that day long ago, walking through the storm with books in his hands, and this time, he felt no weight, only a quiet, steady warmth in his chest. Sundar stood beside him, the sound of rain tapping against the ground. "Sometimes," he said, "the most important things we do are the ones no cameras catch." Moti nodded. "Yes, but they are the ones that last the longest." And together, they walked into the rain, leaving the lights of the hall behind, carrying with them the kind of moment that would live far beyond the night. The rain fell softly as they walked toward the cars waiting outside. The air was cool, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant jasmine from a nearby garden. Streetlights cast a golden glow on the puddles, and every drop of water seemed to ripple with quiet meaning. Moti walked a few steps ahead, his thoughts deep but calm. Sundar and Ramon Bhai followed close behind, their steps slow, as if none of them wanted the night to end just yet. When they reached the cars, Moti turned to Ramon Bhai. "I don't want this to be our last meeting," he said firmly. "I want you to visit me. There are many stories we still need to share." Ramon Bhai smiled, his eyes warm. "I will come, but remember, I am happiest knowing that you are still the boy who once stood in the rain for a promise." The words struck something deep in Moti's chest. He nodded silently, the rain slipping down his face like small threads tying the past to the present. Just then, the young girl came running toward them, holding her notebook under her shawl to keep it dry. She stopped a few feet away, her breathing quick from the short sprint. "Sir," she said softly, "I want to promise something too." Moti smiled and stepped closer. "And what is that?" She looked straight at him, her voice steady, despite her small frame. "I promise that when the library is built, I will help every child in my village learn to read, and when they can read, I will tell them the story of tonight." For a moment, no one spoke. Sundar's lips curved into a quiet smile, and Ramon Bhai's eyes glistened with pride. Then, Modi said gently. Your promise and mine will grow together. The girl grinned shyly, then turned and ran back toward her family, her footsteps splashing through the shallow puddles. Sundar looked at Modi. It's strange, he said softly, how one decision to stay a little longer can change so much. Modi glanced at him, a faint smile on his lips. It's not strange. It's what happens when we choose people over schedules. They stood there for a moment longer, listening to the rain. The night had started as a public event, a routine appearance in a busy life. But it had ended as something far more, a bridge between past and present. A reminder of promises made and kept, and the start of a new chain of kindness that would outlive them all. As the cars finally pulled away, Sundar watched the reflection of the streetlights sliding across the rain-soaked road. He thought about the tea stall, about the kindness given without expectation, about the girl with the notebook, and about the man beside him who still carried the heart of the boy from so long ago. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this night would not be remembered for speeches or headlines, but for the quiet words that made someone stay in the rain, that carried their promise forward.